Good morning, and thank you for coming today to share this service of farewell to Susan, to be with her family and to support one another. It's a privilege to welcome you this morning as I listen to the hum of conversation going on between you, that warmth that expresses something of how we are as we think of Susan today. Yes, we bring sadness and loss, but also pride and gratitude for our associations with her. And so on behalf of her family today, Carl, Kirsten, Alison, her brother Peter, and John, and her sister Mary, thank you for being here, and members of their family, of course. You know, when we come to the edge of life, what counts is not money in the bank or buildings we own or degrees we have. It's much more about people. The friendships we forge, the shoulders we rub, the people with whom we share the journey of life and love together. It's about connections that give us meaning. And sadly, our connection with Susan has been broken this last week physically. But we've come to claim some things today which will always be with us because of her being part of our journey. And so thank you for being here. And if you don't speak from the microphone, might I suggest your presence is already a statement of your solidarity and support, of your love and understanding. Thank you for coming to make that statement today. And if you're like me, you'll bring some feelings, not only your head, but your heart. And if somebody wants to laugh and somebody else wants to cry at the same time, that'll be okay. Just be yourself. Don't worry about the person along the seat from you. For in feeling our individuality, I believe that helps us to unfold and celebrate the unique and special person that Susan Maria Butterworth both was and always will be to us. And so thank you for being here today. If after the service is complete you'd like to join the family in the foyer for some refreshment, they'd be happy to have you. And for those who want to tarry a little longer, if you'd like to join the family intimately at John's place at 43 Beach Street in Howrah, then you're welcome. Let's reflect this morning on Susan as we listen to Hail, Queen of Heaven.
Hail, Queen of Heaven, the ocean star, guide of the wanderer here below, thrown on life's surge, we claim thy care, save us from peril and from woe.
John is going to read to us this morning, but just before he does, on a lighter note, let me remember that brothers and sisters playing together had a little bit of fun. Peter got a dart set for his birthday, and he and John and Susan were playing with it. Susan threw her dart and it hit a piece of the wire on the dartboard and bounced down onto the floor. Peter, thinking himself a gentleman, bent over to pick it up, and John couldn't resist putting a dart into the back of his trousers, bent over. So John, a story today, but we're really happy to have you share, because your brother chased you around and never caught up with you, and so today maybe is the time. Thank you for coming to read to us this morning.
Yes, I'd like to think the only reason I'm here today is because I was always a bit faster than him. Anyway, it's about Suze, isn't it? Well, I've come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me. I want no rights in a gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not too long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember that love comes once, that we once shared. Miss me, but let me go. Well, this is a journey that we all must take, and each must go alone. It's all a part of the Master's plan, a step on the road to home. Miss me, but let me go. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I'm 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I'm not there. I did not die. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And while let Susan go, we must. There are things we need to share and celebrate today, things that are really important. If I look at her lovely photo on the front of the order of service sheet, I think it will conjure up some images differently for each person in the room. None of us have known the same person because we've known her through our own lens. And let me invite you today, as you listen to a presentation or two of Susan's life and character, to use your own memories, to dig into those treasures you hold. And maybe when the service is complete in the foyer and you have a chance to share, you might have a story or two of your own to tell. But as we think of this lovely woman, Susan, today, let me invite you to listen first of all to Rick Snell from the law school. And for his colleagues and other colleagues with us today, thank you for being here, Rick. It's our pleasure to have you speak.
Dear family and friends of Sue Butterworth, I've been asked by Alison and Carl to talk about Sue's involvement with the law school, a special place in her life and a place made special by her presence there for almost 15 years. My task and honour today is to pay tribute to an outstanding and wonderful woman. A tribute not only on behalf of myself and my family, but on behalf of literally hundreds of lawyers, government officials and graduates whose lives, attitudes were shaped and transformed by becoming part of Sue's world. Many who only knew that Sue worked at the law school might be surprised by the strength, degree and source of outpouring and fond memories that has been shared with Sue's family in the last week from those connected with the law school. Hundreds of graduates have expressed a sense of loss but also gratitude for having Sue around at a critical point of our lives and careers. We all know that Sue was not very tolerant of fools, nor could she stand being praised or recognised for her achievements. I'm sure she's mad and with me at the very moment on both accounts. But I love to annoy and stir her, and for my sins I received twice as much grief back on each occasion. Yet despite Sue's likely objections, we can't and shouldn't ignore the lasting legacy that she has left. No one else in the period that Sue worked at the law school touched so many people so deeply, so profoundly. She went from being simply a law school secretary to a person who has been described in the following terms. And I could have chosen hundreds of particular quotes, and these samples I've got are only just that. Marcus Fowler, a graduate, wrote to me and said, "Sue was such an integral, wonderful part of the law school in the years that I was studying, in 1991 to 96. Her cutting wit, knowledge, patience, and ultimate affection for our role as students was indispensable." Another graduate, Paul Graff, said to me, "Through the long years at law school, Sue was a constant presence in the aquarium that was somehow reassuring to me. At times of self-doubt, wondering what the hell I was doing there, she always had a smile and a chat and could make me feel if I was one of the law school family, a feeling of belonging. She must have seen countless students and staff flow through that faculty, but I suspect that she had a special gift of making thousands of other students feel exactly the same way." In particular, Sue served as an invaluable and friendly face for international students, a group of students who are not only attempting the hardships of a law degree, but facing those hardships away from family and friends in another culture. Her care and support for international students, many of them now occupying powerful positions in their home countries, remains deeply appreciated. As an example, Suka Magnesi, Acting Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Tonga, wrote, "As an international student, her kind and warm demeanour made me feel comfortable and free to ask anything and everything of her regarding schoolwork, with the often mention of other non-school matters, which made the relationship even more personal. She was always well dressed and kind, with great social skills, which made me as an international student more at home whilst away from home." Last night I got an email from Samuel Manatoli, who's now the Tourism Minister in the Solomon Islands, who agreed exactly with everything that Suka had to say about being an international student in a faraway country and the kind of grace that Sue brought to their lives. This elegant, beautiful and eloquent woman worked her magic day in and day out from the very first day of starting her job at the law school. Year after year, Sue did her job in full public view at the aquarium. This was an office, a large office, with a large open area right at front, so she was on public display 9 to 5 each day of her working life. But she carried that out in an amazing way. She did her job with little control over when or how long busy periods would last. She would often be flooded by students, hundreds of students at the same time, all wanting the same thing. Other times there would be these incredible periods of loneliness because everyone else was working in the classrooms or away on summer break, yet Sue had to sit there as a secretary and carry out her functions in complete isolation and loneliness in that period. And she did it with no control over the types of jobs that staff needed to done, usually urgently and usually by yesterday, and usually with minimal, or in my case, indecipherable instructions to be able to carry that out. In the 1989 Advocates of Law School magazine, it was clear that Sue had made an immediate impact on the first group of students that she had encountered at the law school. They wrote, "Of course, our special, eternally grateful thanks go to Sue Butterworth for just being wonderful. She corrected our grammatical and spelling errors, reminded us of meetings, bent over backwards to help us, so she alleged, and danced the legs off us at the law ball." And I think academic staff could make the same type of comments about our treatment from Sue and the contributions that she made to us. Year in and year out, when her own life was going through its ups and downs, even when her health was not great, she managed to continue to work her professional magic every working day. We know Sue loved the party, and outside work hours was a bit of a wild child, but her performances on the dance floors at the law balls were indeed legendary, including one episode where she undertook crowd surfing from the stage in that process. So, you can imagine how she warmed herself to the hearts of various lawyers and law students through history. Yet in work hours, she turned the position of typist and collector and dispenser of student assignments into a really special role. She terrified first-year students, a terror that completely house-trained generations of UTAS lawyers. There are thousands of secretaries around the world who have received special treatment from UTAS graduates who never realised the great debt that they owe Sue Butterworth in carrying out the training of these lawyers. First-year students very quickly learnt their place or proper station in life. I was going to make a quote here that you gave me, Alison, but I've looked at some of the younger faces in the audience. So, okay. Effectively, Sue's response about first-year students was that, as Alison said here, was that Mum had no time for first-year students until they learnt some respect and pulled a stick out of their arses. And that applied as equally to academics. And there were a number of academics who never did get to pull that stick out, and they never earned Sue's respect in that period of time. But our current Premier, Lara Giddings, wrote to me while she's been overseas, and this is, I think, a tribute to Sue, that people have taken time out of their professional lives to make special mention of it. And Lara writes, I seem to recall being a little intimidated by her in my early years in the law school. Very gross understatement by a politician there. But came to realise her passion for her work and for all of us students. Yet this terrifying person later became a key person in students' ability to cope at the law school. And I know that Will Hodgman is here, and he effectively wrote to me and said the following. She certainly played a pivotal role in helping me through to graduation. I think there's hundreds of students who have the same expression, that they're only lawyers, politicians, government officials now, because somewhere, somehow in their degree, Sue intervened to give them a degree of assistance that made it all possible. For many students, the most wonderful moment in their law degree was not passing their first exam, and I know this will shock you, Gino Delpine, or getting 80% in contract law, or even graduation. But it was that moment, after what seemed an eternity of time in the law school, that they were greeted by a smile by the very first time from Sue, i.e. they removed the stick, and she addressed them by name. So they quickly learnt that the only way you got recognised and treated fairly was effectively to lose your pretensions and become a real person. Once you became a real person, then Sue was your real friend in that process. Rena Bean told me, I remember the first time I had to approach the gatekeeper of the aquarium. She was so stern and intimidating. By the end of the first semester of contract law, I realised that she was an absolute gem and a softie, an amazing woman once you earned her respect, and that was the secret to Sue. If you earned her respect, then you had a friend for life. I loved the start of a new year, watching fearful students, terrified students approach Sue to submit their work. We would sit back and snigger. For me, Sue was a law school. Greatly loved, mentor and wise woman who restored our faith after our ordeals with the strong belief, of course you can do it. Year after year, Sue watched, engaged with and helped students to go from fresh-faced first years to confident graduates. She always desperately hunted up tickets to each graduation to look down, usually from near the back of a large auditorium, sitting in the back rows, to looking down, watching her students graduate, because every single law student who graduated was one of hers in that process. And even after ill health forced her from the law school, year after year, until the very last student that she had encountered as a first-year student passed through the law school, did she stop coming to graduations to watch people involved in that process. Just a few final reflections about Sue. Tom Baxter wrote to me and said, as one of the countless students Sue helped over the years, my enduring memories are of a warm, friendly face across the counter at her aquarium, always willing to make time for a chat, generally interested, making you feel as much more than just another student number, ever ready to calm and assist panicky students submitting overdue assignments. The law school would be shocked to find that a large number of assignments were handed in late by the good grace of Sue, effectively turning a blind eye and saving many a law student and lawyer's future careers in the process of having their assignments marked as received on time. Nothing ever seemed too much trouble for her. Sue was much more than a law faculty receptionist. She was a part of the heart and the soul of the place. Thousands of former students will fondly remember her. Carolyn Walsh wrote to me and said she was always a perfect mix of scary, smiling charm at the aquarium. Every law school needs a Sue. Ursula Crawley captures Sue's special impact really well. Sue was an amazing influence in the law faculty. There's a saying, your dream job doesn't exist, you have to create it. And she did. She was equal parts administrator, office manager, gatekeeper, confidant and friend. She was a dose of realism and warmth, and we all grew up under her influence. I hope Sue's funeral is a wonderful celebration of her life. It was my pleasure and privilege to share a key part of my working life and the early years of my children's lives with such a wonderful lady. The law school has been around for almost 120 years, but I think no other era to date has had as much heart or has been so closely linked to a student body as the Sue Butterworth era. Thank you, Sue, for a wonderful and lasting legacy.
Thank you, Rick, for that wonderful reflection of Sue. Mary, you've worked in another area of education. It must be satisfying for you and your brothers to see your little sister receive such warm acknowledgement and appreciation today. But perhaps the closest connections are most important, and to bring us a more intimate picture. This morning, Alison and then Carl are going to speak to us. Thank you. Unless you want to come together.
Hi everybody. So kind of unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. We have two here today. We've got one that I wrote, and we've got the one that Mum wrote. Always be prepared. I'll say mine, and then Carl can have his time, and then I'll do Mum's. First, I'd like to say I'm going to actually tear this to bits. Sorry, just give me 2 seconds. I'm not prepared. I'm not like Mum. I'm not like Rick. I think I did this at 10 o'clock last night. There we go. I'll just hold on to those bits. Right. First, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who attended today or sent condolences to myself, Carl, Kirsten, and of the extended family Butterworth. Sue would have been pleased and humbled by such a turnout as this. I don't think she would have been surprised, though. She knew how much we all loved, cared and respected her. Special thanks go to Rick, who has written the most absolutely wonderful eulogy I think I've ever heard, apart from my own, about her working years at the law school. I'll try not to make this a speech about how much we miss her, because that's a given. I'll attempt to create an image of her that we can keep with us always, not of a person who has been unwell for some time, but of a vivacious woman who had a sparkle in her eye and a ready double entendre hovering on her lips. I like to think I inherited that bit from her, and I think Carl did too, but her uncles had something to do with that. So, I'll try not to be too long. Mum had such a varied life, and it's hard to put it all in one short speech, and forgive us if we get boring. Stick around for coffee and cake afterwards, it's worth it. Right, I don't want to talk about regrets or sadness, but of memories. Look, handwritten. She shared memories with us, and we made memories with her. Some of her strongest memories were of her childhood. After all, aren't everybody supposed to be? I've had to appeal to Mary and John for confirmation of some stories and anecdotes about Mum's childhood. Some I knew, but I wanted to try and get the facts straight. Sue was born on the 6th of February 1949, eventually, to Ronald, William and Chrissy Deborah Butterworth. It took 3 ambulances to get Grandma from Cygnet to Hobart, where Mum was eventually born. 3 ambulances because they'd either broken down or had a flat. And there at the Queen Alexandra Hospital, a baby girl was born, little sister to Mary, Peter and John. She was a much-loved little mite. Mary told me the story of when Sue was very ill with the black measles, which I always thought was a furphy, but apparently it's a real thing. At about 12 months of age, and the 2 adults and 4 kids were living in a 2-room shack in Cygnet. And Grandma had to try and feed the poor baby the only thing that was available, sulphur tablets, which some of you may remember. Big pink squares that smelled of musk and tasted awful. They had to be ground up and mixed into jam. Grandma stayed up all night to make sure that she was still breathing. The doctor came every 2 to 3 hours to make sure the baby Susan was okay. At about 18 months of age, when the house in Cygnet was actually being built, she scared the bejesus out of everyone again by climbing the ladder onto the flat roof of the laundry, which she promptly fell off. Her hard Butterworth head suffered no lasting or obvious injuries. Grandpa was not just the council clerk at Cygnet, but also a pig farmer with an apple orchard. Mum loved cuddling the squealing little pink piglets. On hot days, the pigs used to hop the fence and meet her and her siblings on the street, where they followed her home to get a squirt from the hose by Grandma. I'm sure the pigs weren't the only thing to get a squirt. Sue had curls as a child. At school, she and a small friend, what was her name? No, the one that cut Mum's hair. McCluskey. Winifred McCluskey. If any of you remember Winifred McCluskey, say hi. She and a small friend hid behind a table at school with a pair of scissors and cut each other's hair, as small friends are wont to do. Mum got caught holding the scissors, just about to cut the pigtails off of her friend while her own hair lay on the ground about her. Grandma was in hospital when this happened. When she got home, she had no idea who the small boy in the corner of the room was. And they never grew back. She used to tell us that the kids were sent down to the shops to buy a fresh loaf of bread. By the time they got back, the bread would be mostly hollow, because the kids would pick and pick and pick until it was just hollowed out crust. So they'd be sent back to get another one. Mum was convinced that Grandma would do it just to get everyone out of her hair and get fed. After Sunday Mass, there was the occasional threepenny ice creams, tiny things about this big, Mum used to say, for a treat. They'd try and make them last till they got home, and so they could put sprinkles on them, and if they were lucky, they got the family brick from Wiley's shop. I just was sitting there and I remembered a story that Mum used to tell me. Forgive me, Uncle Peter and Uncle John, but I'm going to tell this one. Mum was jealous of the way that the boys could pee up against telegraph poles. So she tried once and it was a failure. She also remembered the time that the boys peed into a bottle and then tried to convince her that it was lemonade. You were buggers. Uncle John told me a childhood story that has been kept stum for years. Carmel Hall in Cygnet had a small side room from which they sold fizzy cordial at local doos. After hours, John and Sue would go around to the side and lever out the louver windows, climb in, drink bottles of pop, and take those and other empties round to Reed and Green Inn to buy lollies. I'm certain that her Don Don got her into many scrapes. After her best mate Don Don was sent to school, tomboy Sue would have been at a loose end, because who would make swords and shields with her out of their dad's workshop scraps and play in their cubby house underneath the hawthorn bushes? Mary told me that she was jealous once because Susan got the first shop-bought dress, which was pink checked and had an inbuilt stiff net petticoat. Like mine. Tres elegant. Mary had also once borrowed her little sister Susan's hand-knitted pale coral jumper and made it misshapen by wearing it with a pointy conical bra, which Susan used to annoy Mary with by getting her finger and poking them in the centre so they'd cave inwards. And she borrowed Mary's swimmers, which were too big, and filled out the bodice with little green apples or pears. I admit that I don't know that much about her school years, other than she went to St James School in Cygnet, where she had made some long-lasting friends, St John's in Richmond, where she'd met Dawn, or a time at Sacred Heart. The Butterworths moved to Richmond in 1963, when Mum was 14. At school, she got a job at the taxation, after school, not at school. I know, now the times were different, but they weren't quite that different. She got a job at the taxation office. Grandma sent Sue once off on a transfer to Melbourne, which she hated and only stayed there for a few months. Knowing her, she missed the comfort and security of her family. Mum told me once at the tax office where she first got to use a computer, which filled the entire floor, and had to use punch cards to make it work. The lads at the tax department used to tease her. She said to them that she was tough and ruthless once, but it came out as rough and toothless. She had never lived it down. I'm sure she had a fair share of boyfriends, and she bragged to me once that she was a beach bunny who had a surfy boyfriend, and she used to sit on the beach and watch him surf. Considering that she hated sand, he must have been really one hot date. Sue met Rex, our dad, in 1969. Carl was conceived in EH? Holden? So terribly Australian. And there was a shotgun wedding. Carl was born in 1970 and I was born in 1971. She stayed with him for 10 years. There were good times and bad times, but Mum made certain we saw as little of the bad times as possible. She was our rock, our shield, our dependable Mum. She was beautiful, but not just outside on the surface, but underneath and in her soul. She grew a spine of solid iron in the late 1970s. She had to. Ooh. My makeup. There was no one else there to forge it for her, no one available at the time to help, no systems were in place. We never lacked for anything, and if we had, we never knew. She smiled through her tiredness, gritted her teeth when Carl and I fought, which was constantly and into adulthood, doling out appropriate punishment with either the traditional wooden spoon or the cane-ended feather duster. Jesus, that hurt. I can't remember when Carl stopped being smacked over the hand, but mine stopped when I took the spoon, incidentally her favourite mixing spoon, out of her hand, broke it in two, gave it back, and ran. She loved her work at the law school, especially. I think we got our fabulous work ethic from her. Hi, Joe. Although she much preferred sitting down to a good, raunchy, crappy historical romance, she still sat there with a red pen, editing and correcting occasionally. Often whole passages would be run through with a question mark at the end. She should have sent them back to the publisher. She remembers, I remembered last night that she told me once she was working at the Marine Board building, and she was wearing, as you probably all remember, she was always dressed up to the nines. She had super high heels, massive high heels, showed off her calves, fabulous legs. And she was going across the road from crossing the traffic lights, and she caught one of her heels in a grate, and it snapped at the same time that some guy was ogling her out of the car window. You remember that, Fred? She said she was so embarrassed. She had to go back and reef out her heel and go to work hobbling. And they were her favourite pair of shoes. Mum, Carl and I went to the movies once when we were quite young. She came out of the toilet all flustered and said the little girl in there had asked if she was Mildred from George and Mildred. She said, "No, I am not." She got very huffy about it. It didn't help that the hair and the makeup was dead on. And she didn't change that look for years. She was very conscious of her Butterworth nose, and it always seemed to get in the way when she kissed you, especially on the cheek, and the end of it went into your eye. She had two favourite sayings in her later life: "Somebody ought to blow 'em up," and "Don't get me started." We joke that she should have had a column in the paper. One of her favourite beefs this year has been about the weedy state of the verges along the highways. "Don't get me started. They're a bleeding disgrace. The council ought to do something about it. They ought to be blown up." When she retired from work and after she gave up smoking, she took up cooking. She would cook these elaborate meals for us, and then she'd call us a bunch of freeloaders with a smile on her face. Oh yeah, we still need someone to cook for us. Hands up who does a good roast? Yeah. Anyone? Yeah, I know you do a good roast. All right. She would wake up in the morning and have breakfast and plan lunch while watching a cooking program at 10 a.m. Then after lunch, she'd plan dinner while watching a cooking program at 3 p.m. And woe betide you if you tried to have a conversation with her during those cooking programs, unless it was about food. She would be appalled if anyone attempted to clean out her fridge. Carl and I used to do it in dribs and drabs on the sneak when she was out of the house. Do it in big lots when she was in hospital those couple of times too. And she'd come back and say, "I can't find the thing, Mum. It had mould on it." "But it was still useful, Mum. It was from 3 years ago." "But I could still use it." "Mum, I'll buy you another one." So one of the things that Carl and Kirsten and I will miss with Mum is we used to sit around the dinner table and we would just tell the filthiest jokes, usually fart jokes. She had just the most amazing sense of humour, which we all know she had the most amazing sense of humour. That's one of the things I'm going to miss. She would have been horrified to learn also that her Mick Malthouse from her beloved Collingwood is going to coach Carlton next year. She would be horrified. She died unexpectedly a week ago from complications due to a lifetime of smoking, which gave up 11 years ago when eldest granddaughter Emma was born. I think she realised that she had even more things to live for. And after Carl's Charlotte was born, the reason doubled. Then Bernadette, it tripled, and wee Angus was just the icing on top. She loved all of her grandchildren desperately. She loved all of us, family and friends, even the law students, as thick as they were. Even with all of our faults, which she was happy to individually catalogue, I think in an attempt to help us improve. Sometimes it didn't go down so well. She kept any secret told to her a secret. And for those of us who told her secrets, they have now gone with her to the grave, including where the sodding hell my birthday present is. She will be sorely missed. After you.
Hello, everybody.
Lean down further, Carl.
If people know me, they know that I don't do speeches very well. I will miss her. Things I can remember are she never judged you. If she did, I probably wouldn't have any mates, because if she really knew him, she probably wouldn't let him in the house. I was talking to one of my close friends, and we were talking about funerals, and she could never understand why people would come to a funeral for closure. And I could understand that, because a funeral is a place for celebration where you celebrate a person's life, and I'm sure that we'll celebrate, as Alison would probably say, the bejesus out of Mum's life. We were also, not too long ago, sitting around the table, we're talking with one of Mum's very close friends, and it's just the character of Mum and the character of Mum's friends were. And she said to us, and they'll know who they are when I start talking about this, she says, "I'm upset at your mum for leaving." And we said, "Why is this?" "Because it's her bloody shout at the movies next week." The other thing with Mum is she had to be very patient with me, because you're a bugger of a boy. Apart from that, bugger of a boy. She was often running me to the doctor and the hospital. I can remember the time I fell off grandfather's roof and broke my wrists. And here I am wailing in the room. Everyone piled in that could into this old Datsun 180B. And there's Mum tearing over the Tassie Bridge, round that bottom corner, tyres squealing. She just had to constantly look after me if I wasn't spraining, twisting, cutting, breaking. Crushing. Yeah. She was just a very patient person. I haven't got a hell of a lot to say. Just that I'm going to miss her a lot. Especially the cooking.
Me too. Hands up, who's going to miss Mum's cooking?
Yeah, I haven't got a hell of a lot to say, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. And now a word from our sponsor. When I die, I'll keep on living. You'll always have my love, seeing you through. I'll be your angel up in heaven. Forever all my love will shine on you. I love you. Apparently that's a quote from No Mercy from 1997. She was a funny bugger. Susan Maria Butterworth, born 6th of February 1949. She wrote this, I think, maybe 2 years ago. Youngest of 4 children to Chrissy and Ron Butterworth, born and raised in Cygnet before moving to Richmond at the age of 14. Married to Rex on 26 July 1969 and separated January 1979, which basically means I stuck it out for 10 years longer than I should have. But then I wouldn't have had my 2 beautiful children. I remember my childhood as being idyllic. The sun was always shining. The days were never long enough to fit in all we wanted to. I had a group of really good friends as well as my Don to wander wherever we wanted, filling our days with swimming, fishing and falling in, building cubby houses, apples straight from the tree, bushwalks, potatoes in the ashes of bonfires, football and cricket, wood-cutting expeditions, the Christmas at Nugent, Granny's Christmas put heavy with threepence and sixpence for the kids, and growing up secure in the love of our parents. Hang on. Sorry. I guess one has to believe there is something after death, or my whole adult life had no point besides giving birth to the 2 most beautiful people who I've loved unreservedly. Let's be honest here. There were times when I was disappointed, but never believe you were not wholly loved and cherished. Times when you were hurt that in turn hurt me most of all, when all I wanted to do was cuddle and wrap you in cotton wool. Bloody hell. And tell the world to go away and leave you alone. There were a couple of times when I could see you taking the wrong path, walking with the wrong people. I could only suggest and guide, but I trusted in your judgment, and ultimately, in that, you never disappointed me. One gets back what one is given. Never believed that I was not totally proud of who you were, what you were, and how you grew. Some said I was a godless person because I didn't go to church. I think God could be the best judge of that, and I'd also like to think that by the number of my beloved family, dear friends, workmates and acquaintances attending my funeral, so she all knew you were going to be here, one could say that I was well thought of and a Christian person who at least lived by the tenets of the church. I think there are quite a few regular churchgoers whose soul couldn't bear a close examination. I always try to live by the saying, do unto others as you would have done unto you. I would like to think I never did anyone a bad turn and that no one ever had anything too bad to say about me. There would be people, friends, ex-students, staff, family, scattered all over the world whom I believe would remember me with love and speak of me kindly. I don't need to mention my siblings because we all grew up together. We know and love each other and have the common bond peculiar to all families where words are not necessary. Of all of my friends, I would like to single out my mate Dawn, who I first met when our children were in primary school at St John's. Everyone in the world should have a friend like her. We supported each other during the bad times and laughed together during the good times, and always there, different yet the same. I would like to leave you with these final words. Love each other as I have loved you. Please learn to put things back where you found them, when you are finished with them. And finally, when will you learn to put the toilet roll on the holder the right way round, back and over and out? I'd also just quickly like to say, I'm sorry, I haven't gotten around to mentioning everybody who was important to her, but you all knew how important you were to Sue. And I'm so happy you're all here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison and Carl. To borrow Rick's words, Susan was eloquent and elegant. She was engaging and endearing. Will you view a few photographs as we listen to The Lady Was a Tramp?
I've wined and dined on mulligan stew and never wished for turkey. I've hitched and hiked and drifted too, from Maine to Albuquerque. Alas, I miss the Beaux-Arts ball, and what is twice as I was never at a party where they honored Noel Card. His social circles moved too fast for me. My hobohemia is the place to be. I get too hungry for dinner at 8. I love the theater, but never come late. I never bother with people I hate. That's why this lady is a tramp. I don't like crap games with barons and earls. Won't go to Harlem in ermine and pearls. Won't dish the dirt with the rest of those girls. That's why this lady is a tramp. I like the free, fresh wind in my hair. Life without care. I'm broke, that's oak. Hate California, it's cold and it's damp. That's why this lady is a tramp. I like the free, fresh wind in my hair. Life without care. I'm broke, that's so. Hate California, it's cold and it's damp. That's why this lady is a tramp. And I love it. Yes, I'm a tramp and I love it. And I wish that you were coming my way, yeah. I wish that you were coming my way, yeah. I wish that you were coming my way. Yes, I'm a lady, but a
Especially when we're leaning up against the wall.
Let's get away.
That's right, because your TV's jiggling, you can't keep the camera still. Not every small. Small? Good on you.
She never got sick of cuddling her kids, did she? And her grandchildren, Charlotte and Bernadette, Emma and little Angus, not yet one. Listening to Shirley Bassey reminds us the nature of funerals has changed from sombre eulogy to perhaps a lighter note of storytelling. And yet the therapeutic nature of that is very important. Many of us have lost loved ones, but none of us can quite feel what that's like for Carl or Alison today and her siblings. But just to be here and let them know we care is really important. And the storytelling is important because as they journey through grief, they have to accept the reality of death and absorb its pain, adjust their environment to no longer having mum to talk or touch, to one day emotionally relocate her, where their point of connection will gently move sideways, so part of them doesn't get locked in the past with her, but they find that gentle and safe place where they can take her with them into the future. And grief is not about moving to resolution. It's about moving in those continuing bonds to reinvestment, of taking Sue's characteristics, our strong memories of her, the values by which she lived, and the strength of her love to each one of us, and reinvesting those in the stories you tell not only to Charlotte and Bernadette because they've got some of their own, but to Emma and Angus, and to allow that storytelling to become the continuing legacy of Susan's life. And so that's really important, and we've enjoyed it today, but the time has come to acknowledge our loss. And how do we let a mother go? How do we say, I'm ready now to go on without you? How can we ever have a clue of what that really means? And of a sudden, the moment is upon us and there's no turning back. And then we know what grief is, and guilt, and love, and things undone. Try to prepare, and we will fail in some way, be it subtle or looming. But there is peace too, peace and acceptance, and overwhelming love that maybe we weren't aware of, and waves of conflicting emotion, and laughter too, and memories we haven't bothered lately to recall come flooding back in shared company. And it's all about you, Mum. It's all about you, Nan. And there's gratitude, so much of that we had you such a wonderful mother. Bright and shining, nobody's fool, independent but humble too, smart and kind and fun, adventurous. A part of you has passed away, but much is carried every day within us and will as long as we are here. This may be a final tribute, a day to celebrate your life and say goodbye, but it's not final. Every day I'll celebrate in some way, just by the virtue of how you shaped my life, the absolute and incredible fortune that I knew you as a mother, a woman, and a friend. And so with these words which you take away with you, let me ask you to think of how we say farewell to Susan today. If you want to sit in your seat and just think or thank or pray or meditate, whatever's your personal choice, please feel free to do so. Or if you would like, as I've done, to come to the front and stand at the casket for a moment and say your own farewell as we listen to some quiet instrumental music. No, I think we've got another piece. We've got Annie's song, haven't we? Annie's song. Then please feel free to come down. The family have just a final tribute they want to lay on the casket. So as you choose, as we close today, say farewell to Susan.
You fill up my senses like a night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, like a storm in the desert, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses, come fill me again. Let me give my life to you. Let me drown in your laughter. Let me die in your arms. Let me lay down beside you. Let me always be with you. Come, let me love you. Come, love me like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, like a storm in the desert, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses, come fill me again.
As you think of Susan today, might you find warmth and richness in your feelings, an encouragement and example in your memories of her. And as you leave, you think of what the real values of your own families. And John and Mary and Peter, you bring 10 cousins to Carl and Alison. And family warmth is really important, isn't it? And so might you find support and strength in your love for one another. And may you find peace in your hearts. May I respectfully invite you to stand for the committal. We come as family and friends today to farewell Susan. And as we do, we open our hearts and feel the depth of loss that changes the way life is lived. But we remember that while death changes life, love doesn't diminish. And we value that love. We say thank you, Susan, for the love that you've given, for the life you've lived, for your laughter, your caring connections with so many colleagues and students, but your intimate and undying connection with your family. And today, as we gently release your body to the elements, as earth to earth and ashes to ashes and dust to dust, we recognise the return of your gentle spirit into God's hands, and we are grateful that your journey will return you to your father Ronald and your mother Chrissy. And as we look forward to that day, when we might all one day live in a land where there'll be no more sickness or suffering, no more sadness or separation, we just gently say, thank you, Father God, for your love reflected in Susan. And we ask that you'll keep her safely in your hand until we meet again, in and through the name and the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ. For we praise you for Susan Maria Butterworth today. Amen. And so our final song as we leave, Ave Maria.
It's